Sunday, November 30th, began with a silence so heavy it felt unnatural. The kind of silence that settles right before something breaks. Fog clung low to the ground outside Fort Dix, swallowing the fences, the towers, the razor wire, until the entire facility looked like it was floating in a gray void. Inside, the early shift officers walked their usual routes, boots tapping against the concrete, radios clicking softly, unaware that within minutes their entire world was about to detonate. And the explosion didn't start with a riot or a scream or a pounding on steel doors. It started with a video, a short, grainy, silent clip that appeared online with no warning, no watermark, no source, nothing to identify how it escaped one of the most controlled federal facilities in the country. It didn't spread slowly. It didn't trickle. It hit the internet like someone dropped a match onto gasoline. This new footage wasn't like the previous leaks. It wasn't suspicious. It wasn't questionable. It wasn't circumstantial. It was final. The clip opens inside the Disciplinary Control Wing, one of the most restricted sections in Fort Dix, a place sealed by dual biometric locks, monitored by two overlapping security checkpoints, accessible only by senior correctional officers. Inmates don't pass through here. They don't walk near it. They don't even see it. The walls look different in this wing, cleaner, smoother, more polished, like the kind of area designed for internal protocols, not inmate movement. Yet into that frame walked Sean Diddy Combs. No escort, no restraints, no officers, just him. He pauses under a flickering overhead light, his silhouette stretching across the floor like a shadow trying to outrun him. He glances behind him, not in fear, but with the calm awareness of someone checking timing, someone who knows exactly where he is, someone who has been here before. Then the camera moves, not like a CCTV angle, not like a fixed security mount. The lens shifts, adjusts, reacts like someone is holding it, and that is what sent the federal system into freefall. The footage is being recorded by a person standing inside the restricted zone. A person wearing a deep navy sleeve with a silver ID patch, an unmistakable marker of a senior correctional officer. In past leaks, the evidence was subtle. A shadow, a partial sleeve, a suggestion. But this time the patch is fully visible, clear, unavoidable. An image impossible to deny, impossible to explain, impossible to ignore. Diddy walks deeper into the wing, toward a reinforced door lined with hazard stripes, a place reserved only for disciplinary isolation procedures. He shouldn't be anywhere near it. No inmate should. But he moves with confidence, not hesitation, like he knows the door will respond. And then it does, without a key card visible, without an officer touching the lock. It opens, smoothly, effortlessly, as if triggered from inside. The camera angle widens slightly. The officer recording the video steps backward, steady, silent. And in that widened frame, another figure appears standing partly behind a thick column, hidden but not enough. Taller than Diddy, bulkier, the posture unmistakable. Not an inmate, not a visitor. Someone trained, someone with rank. They meet in the corner, leaning close. Diddy lowers his head. The shadowed figure tilts forward. Something small passes between them, so quick it almost disappears, but just slow enough for millions of viewers to freeze the frame, rewind, analyze, argue, panic. Then the camera dips and the officer's ID badge swings into view. Crystal clear, readable, devastating. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a lapse. This wasn't negligence. It was collaboration, a coordinated breach from inside Fort Dix itself. Most people didn't make it past the 12-second mark before sharing it, reposting it, screaming, "What is this?" across every platform. Legal experts reacted instantly. Former correctional officers went live within minutes, calling the footage the single most incriminating evidence yet. Analysts pointed at the badge, the door behavior, the camera movement, and the public didn't need an explanation. They knew exactly what they were seeing. For the first time since this case began, it wasn't just a violation caught on tape. It wasn't just a suspicious moment. It wasn't just a rule broken. It was proof. Proof that Diddy wasn't slipping through cracks, he was being guided through them. And that was the moment the world realized. Diddy isn't just in trouble, he's finished. When the footage reached Judge Subramanian's desk, he didn't schedule a briefing. He didn't call for an emergency hearing. He didn't wait for Fort Dix to submit an explanation. He pressed play. Once, twice, a third time. Each time the badge entered frame, each time the door opened without authentication, each time Diddy leaned in toward the shadowed figure, the judge's expression hardened not with anger, but with a deeper, colder recognition. The system wasn't failing. It had already failed. The silence in his chambers was suffocating. His assistant didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe too loudly. On the third viewing, the judge leaned back slowly, eyes narrowing, jaw locked, breath deepening like a man arriving at a decision he never wanted to make, but could no longer avoid. This wasn't misconduct. This was conspiracy. This was betrayal of federal authority. This was every warning sign from June to October, returning all at once to demand the final answer. "Prepare the final order," he said quietly. 6 words, soft, controlled, but sharp enough to change everything. But before we go deeper, before we go back to June, where the collapse truly began, before we revisit July's raids, before we reach October 3rd, where the judge tried to save control for the last time, do one thing. Because what comes next isn't rumor, it isn't speculation, it's the documented chain of events that led to today's breaking point. Like this video, subscribe to the hidden evidence. Hit the bell icon because this story is entering its final stage and you do not want to miss what happens next. All right, let's go back to the beginning, to the first cracks in June that no one paid attention to the signs that were ignored, to the warnings that were buried, and to the decisions that slowly, quietly, inevitably led to Diddy's final downfall on this Sunday morning. Long before this Sunday morning, long before the badge swung into frame, long before the door opened without authorization, the collapse had already begun. It didn't start with a major event, it never does. It started quietly in June, with the kind of whispers people ignore until those whispers turn into thunder. Back in June, the earliest signs were subtle, too subtle for the public, but not subtle enough for those who knew what to listen for. Former associates began appearing in unexpected places, obscure podcasts, late-night interviews, long-form discussions where they danced around the edges of stories without fully saying what they meant. A shift in tone, a tightening of voices, a heaviness in their words. They weren't accusing, but they weren't denying either. Each comment was like a crack forming beneath the surface of a structure that looked solid on the outside but was beginning to tremble deep within. And federal investigators pay attention to tremors. By mid-June, calls were quietly being made. Files were opened, not criminal cases yet, but preliminary folders, marked for monitoring. Agents don't open folders unless they sense something, and something in the air around Diddy's world smelled wrong. Not dramatic, not loud, just wrong, like a pressure building behind a sealed door. July didn't just confirm the whispers, it amplified them. This is when Homeland Security made their move. No teasers, no warnings, no friendly visits. It was swift, coordinated, and intentional. Raids executed at 2 properties connected to Diddy. Agents didn't go for physical valuables. They went for digital weapons, old phones, hard drives, cloud login archives, encrypted devices, anything that could expose patterns. Digital evidence doesn't lie, and digital evidence doesn't forget. Industry insiders panicked. Lawyers made private calls. Associates whispered about something big coming. Federal agencies don't move like that without a reason. And suddenly the whispers weren't whispers. They were alarms ringing in the distance, still faint but growing. Then came August. If June was cracks forming and July was thunder rumbling, August was the moment the storm reached Fort Dix. Because that was when the prison staff first noticed something that didn't fit the pattern of ordinary inmate behavior. Minor violations at first, nothing dramatic. But they accumulated strangely. An escort that didn't match the log, a door sensor that recorded movement at the wrong time, a blind spot on a hallway camera that hadn't existed the day before, a request Diddy made that didn't make sense, Another request he didn't make but somehow received. Little things, tiny things. Things that supervisors initially waved away. But patterns matter. And this pattern hinted at something no one wanted to admit. It wasn't just an inmate bending rules. It was a system bending around him. September tightened the noose. Internal memos circulated. Quiet ones. Restricted ones. Messages labeled "Monitor closely," "Review all logs," "Double-check protocol compliance." Emails were exchanged late at night. Supervisors met behind closed doors. People asked questions without using names. Officers avoided eye contact when discussing escort routes. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Something inside Fort Dix wasn't adding up, but the public had no idea. Outside the prison walls, everything still looked normal. Stories came and went, headlines shifted, people moved on. No one knew that inside those guarded halls, the foundation was already rotting. Then came October, the month that transformed all the suspicions, all the warnings, all the quiet fears into undeniable truth. In the first week of October, a restricted report landed on Judge Subramanian's desk. It wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It wasn't filled with accusations or conclusions, but the details were enough to send a pulse of alarm through anyone who understood how federal confinement works. Unauthorized movement, incorrect escort procedures, a missing timestamp on an internal record, and the most concerning line of all, inmate appears to have approached restricted staff zones without approved escort. That sentence alone suggested a dangerous possibility, either negligence or collaboration. Neither one is survivable in a high-profile federal confinement. That's when October 3rd became the defining moment. Court insiders say the atmosphere that morning was unusually heavy, as if everyone sensed the weight of what was about to happen. Judge Subramanian entered with a slow, steady walk, stern eyes, tightened jaw, posture straight as steel. Not angry, not emotional, focused, like a man who had carried a growing concern for weeks and was finally ready to secure the structure before it collapsed entirely. The courtroom was filled, reporters whispering, lawyers shifting, officers standing rigid, everyone waiting for the decision. When the judge spoke, the tone was measured but unmistakably firm. 50 months, zero tolerance, extreme supervision, no exceptions, no special privileges, no leniency. He outlined every condition like he was building a cage made of rules, designed to prevent even the slightest opportunity for mishandling or misinterpretation. His words weren't casual. They were warnings wrapped in legal authority. This supervision will be absolute, he declared. This structure will not be compromised. But it already was, because at that exact moment, unknown to the court, unknown to the public, unknown to even some staff inside Fort Dix, cracks had grown into fractures, violations had grown into patterns, patterns had grown into breaches, breaches had grown into partnerships, and that partnership is what surfaced today. The judge believed the system needed to regain control. He didn't know the system had already lost it. He didn't know someone inside was removing the bars he was trying to reinforce. He didn't know the structure he built on October 3rd was standing on sand. By mid-October, the facility was struggling to contain the truth. Officers whispered quietly. Supervisors reviewed footage obsessively. People suspected someone among them, but no one dared say it out loud. They feared being wrong. They feared being right. They feared confirming the possibility that the collapse wasn't coming from Diddy's actions alone, but from someone protecting him. Even then, no one expected November to deliver the blow that would destroy the entire framework. The first leaked video earlier this month shook the system. The second leak cracked it open. But today's footage shattered it completely, because today didn't show a mistake. It showed a deal, a partnership, a coordinated opening of doors meant to stay locked forever. And that is why this Sunday morning became the end. Not the beginning, not the breaking point, the end. The moment the structure snapped inside Fort Dix, everything that had been held together by silence, denial, and hope collapsed at once. It wasn't a gradual fall. It was sudden, like a dam breaking after months of invisible pressure. Overnight, fear replaced control, confusion replaced routine, and every single person inside that facility, from the rookies to the highest-ranking officers, knew the same thing. There was no recovering from this. As dawn pushed weak light across the compound, the atmosphere inside the prison shifted from panic to paralysis. Officers stood stiff, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Supervisors barked orders that contradicted each other. Someone demanded access logs. Someone else wanted escort rosters. Someone began rewatching camera feeds frame by frame, hoping to find an explanation that didn't exist. But there were no explanations left. Not after the badge. Not after the door. Not after the camera moved. Not after Diddy walked into a place only staff could enter. And in the center of that chaos sat Diddy himself. For once, he didn't look like a man plotting his next move. He didn't look confident or calculating or defiant. He looked still, like someone who had finally understood that whatever had been protecting him, whoever had been helping him, however deep the system had bent around him, it was over. When the officers arrived to take him into custody for emergency transport, they expected argument, resistance, or anger. But he didn't say a word. He didn't question the restraints. He didn't ask where he was being taken. He simply lowered his hands as the cuffs locked into place, metal pressing against his wrists, the cold chain curling around his waist and ankles. He didn't fight any of it. As they led him down the corridor, every inmate who could glimpse him through the narrow glass windows paused. Some swallowed hard. Others shook their heads. A few whispered the words everyone else was afraid to say. It's over. He's done. That new footage killed him. The transport van outside was flanked by federal marshals, a formation usually reserved for high-risk defendants. The engine hummed, exhaust spilling into the cold morning as officers guided Diddy inside. The door slammed, locks engaged, and the convoy pulled away, heading toward Manhattan as the first wave of reporters gathered outside SDNY started to realize something enormous was unfolding. By the time the vehicles reached the courthouse, the sidewalks were already jammed. News vans lined the street, cameras swung toward the building, microphones pointed toward the road, waiting. Reporters surged forward like a tide when the armored doors opened. Flashes exploded, questions fired, chaos erupted. What were you doing in the restricted wing? Did you meet a guard? Are you aware your footage is trending worldwide? Do you know the judge has called an emergency session? Is your sentence being changed today? But Diddy didn't look up. The marshals moved fast, forming a shield around him, guiding him through the noise, up the courthouse steps, through the heavy doors, and into the cold, suffocating silence of the hallway leading to the courtroom. Inside, the courtroom was already full. Prosecutors sat with thick folders stacked in front of them, frames printed from the footage released this morning. Federal officials from Fort Dix sat stiffly in the second row, their faces tight, their posture rigid. Journalists lined the back wall, pens ready, cameras pointed, breaths held. And then the door opened again. The chains rattled before Diddy appeared. He stepped inside slowly, shoulders sagged, eyes lowered. The marshals guided him to the defense table. He sat, head bowed, hands trembling slightly in the restraints. He didn't look like a celebrity. He didn't look like an icon. He looked like a man facing the final moment of a story he could no longer control. Moments later, Judge Subramanian entered. The hush that followed was suffocating. Even the air seemed to thicken as he took his seat, adjusted his glasses, and looked directly at Diddy with an expression so heavy, so disappointed, it silenced the entire room more effectively than any gavel ever could. He didn't begin with protocol. He didn't begin with greetings. He didn't even look at the papers yet. He simply stared at Diddy for a long, uncomfortable second, the kind of second that tells you the outcome is already decided. Then he spoke. "Mr. Combs," he said, voice low, steady, controlled in a way that carried far more weight than shouting ever could. "This court has reviewed the footage released earlier today." He lifted a single still frame of the footage, the one with the silver ID badge visible. "The evidence shown here," he continued, "demonstrates not only a violation of every condition set on October 3rd, but a clear and deliberate breach of the federal confinement structure." Another framed the door opening without authorization. "This is a restricted disciplinary wing. Inmates do not enter these areas under any circumstances." Another framed Diddy meeting the shadowed figure. This is an unauthorized contact with a staff member or individual with internal access. The judge lowered the papers slowly and folded his hands. The Bureau of Prisons cannot explain how this occurred. They cannot identify who assisted you. They cannot provide a single justified reason for your presence in that wing. And if the system cannot uphold the sentence previously imposed, the responsibility for correction falls upon this court. The courtroom froze. The judge's tone shifted, not louder, but colder, sharper, like steel. On October 3rd, I issued a strict zero-tolerance supervision order. You violated that order in ways this court cannot overlook. Diddy's breath hitched, his shoulders tensed, but he didn't speak. In light of today's footage, the judge continued, and in recognition of the systemic compromise it reveals, the court has no option but to impose a sentence that reflects the full severity of these violations. A marshal stepped closer. A reporter dropped their pen. Someone gasped behind the prosecution bench. Judge Subramanian leaned forward, eyes locked onto Diddy with the finality of a man delivering a verdict he did not want to give, but had no choice. Effective immediately, he said, voice like ice. Your sentence is upgraded from 50 months to life imprisonment. The words struck the courtroom like a physical blow. Diddy's body slumped. His head dropped forward. Tears fell onto the chains around his wrists. His breathing grew uneven, sharp, desperate. A marshal placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, fearing he might collapse completely. But the judge wasn't finished. Due to the nature of the violation and the public collapse of supervision integrity, he continued, you have forfeited the right to appeal. This ruling is final. No one moved. No one breathed. No one dared to break the moment. The judge stood. The session ended. And just like that, Diddy's world closed around him. As marshals lifted him to his feet and guided him toward the door, cameras clicked in rapid bursts. His face was pale, wet with tears, drained of every trace of the man he once was. Reporters leaned forward, desperate to capture his final expression before he disappeared behind the heavy wooden doors. He didn't look back. He didn't raise his head. He walked like a man who understood that nothing waited for him outside those doors except the rest of his life, inside a system he once thought he could bend, one that ultimately bent around him until it snapped. And as the doors closed behind him, the world finally saw what the footage had revealed. This wasn't the fall of Diddy. This was the end of him. If you want the full truth behind every leak, every violation, every collapse that led to this moment, make sure you subscribe to The Hidden Evidence. Because this story isn't slowing down. It's getting darker, deeper, and far more explosive than anyone expected. Hit the like button, turn on notifications, and stay with us because the next leak could change everything again.